Thank you for waiting. Thank you very much for joining us today for this briefing session for financial results announcement for Q3 FY2022 for NYK Line, Nippon Yusen Kaisha Line. My name is Shimomura. I serve as facilitator for this meeting. Thank you. First, I'd like to introduce the participants. Representative Director, Senior Managing Executive Officer, Harada. I'm Harada. Nice to see you all. Director, Senior Management Executive Officer, CFO, Soga. I am Soga. Nice to see you. So, Mr. Soga, CFO, is going to explain about the Q3 results of FY2022, followed by F&A session. I'd like to explain how you can ask questions later on. And Mr. Harada is going to make few remarks at the end of the meeting. And we are scheduled to finish at 4 o'clock. And the materials are available on our homepage, so please refer to them. And today's meeting, including Q&A, will be available on demand basis. Mr. Soga, please start. Hello, everyone. I am Soga, CFO of NYK Line. Thank you very much for joining us today despite your tight schedule. Today, using the materials at your hand or materials on the screen, I'd like to explain first about Q3 2022 results overview, and then full year forecast and its revision for the fiscal year 2022. After the presentation, we will move on to Q&A. Before presenting our materials for 2022, what will be the final picture? I would like to present that first. In November, we talked about the second half forecast as well, and we said that the performance and results in the first half will be the peak, and in the second half, especially for container shipping normalization, logistics confusion will be improved. So for the second half of the year, the results will go on a downside trend. That's what we said. And the third quarter results and the forecast for the fourth quarter, based on that information, in short, compared to November forecast, the final picture will be more or less the same as that November forecast, depending on segments. And also, there are some differences between third quarter and the fourth quarter, between different business segments. But in the third quarter, it was actually better than our expectation. And in the fourth quarter forecast, compared to our forecast, it will be rather on the downside. And on a full year basis, slightly, we have revised down the forecast, but more or less in line with our expectation. That is our view. Now, please refer to the materials at hand or the materials on the screen. Q3 overview results. Please look at page 6 and its table. On the right-hand side, in the blue column, are shown Q1, Q2, and Q3 cumulative numbers. Revenue, 2,050.1 billion yen. Operating profit, 249.4 billion yen. Recurring profit, 1,005.9 billion yen. Net income, 920.3 billion yen. Each item exceeded the same period last year, hitting the record high profit. That said, as I mentioned earlier, that we are on the trending down, namely recurring profit, which was increasing from the first quarter of 2021, but this time in Q3 2022, it now changed to trending down. And in the background is the slowdown of earnings of our equity method company, ONE. And on that point, on page 7, I'd like to give you more details when I talk about each business segment results in terms of recurring profits. First, liner trade. On the right-hand side, the blue column, the lower line in each segment box is recurring profit. Recurring revenue is 728.8 billion yen, or up 224.3 billion yen. The major reason is the good business and of ONE container shipping business, our equity method company. But for Q3 alone, compared to Q1 and Q2, profit level is much lower. Still, the 161.7 billion yen of recurring profit was booked. In location of consumption, mainly in Europe and America, the consumer goods have been built up, and combined with inflation, transportation demand decreased, the port congestion improved, increasing container vessel transportation space. And since this summer, the spot freight is on the downward trend, and the cap movement itself is slowing down. ONE could maintain a high freight level through the first half of the year, managing good results in Q3. Next, air cargo. Recurring profit is 56.4 billion yen, exactly the same number as the same period of last year. Partial shift of ocean freight to air freight is weakening, and the robust cargo demand typical for Q3 was not observed this year, and the handling volume decreased year on year. However, the semiconductor-related firm transportation demand and multi-year long-term contracts supported the Q3 to book 12.3 billion yen. Next, logistics business. Recurring profit 50.2 billion yen, or up 4.5 billion yen year on year. In the forwarding section, in air freight business, as I mentioned, for air cargo business, usually busy Q3 was not materialized this year, and the cargo movement was not strong. Handling volume as well as profit level decreased. In the ocean freight business, handling volume itself underperformed the same period last year, but the declining procurement price of container vessels supported the solid profit level, because the spread between our procurement price and the other price that our customers paid was quite good. Contract logistics business in Europe and America, personnel cost, utility cost rose markedly, leading to price revision, and the business progressed very steadily. Next, bulk shipping business. Recurring profit 174.4 billion yen, or up 80.5 billion yen year on year. For automotive transportation, chip shortage and the pandemic reduced car production. But in the third quarter, the situation has improved. Better vessel deployment and substitute cargo also helped, increasing transportation volume year on year, resulting in good performance. Dry bulk business, for all vessel sizes, markets did not grow since the second quarter, underperforming the same period of last year. But in the first quarter, we acquired small, mid-sized bulk carrier transportation contracts, which helped to produce good results. Energy business. For VLCC,
with the firmness in VLCC and VLGC business, we were able to enjoy a very strong improvement in market conditions, and also backed by stable and long-term contracts, LNG and ocean businesses both performed very well. In summary, overall, from the second quarter of fiscal year, we achieved a peak, and then the business turned to a downtrend from the third quarter onwards, and this was mainly due to the slackening of the container vessel market. And also for the bulk shipping business, the bulkers market sluggishness was covered up by the favorable automotive transportation business. So that was the summary. All I just mentioned are illustrated on pages 4 to 5 of the presentation, so please refer to them when you have time. Now, for the cumulative period from the first to the third quarter, we achieved a record high profits. In addition to the cargo movements, one of the major factors behind this was the weaker yen. So if you can look at page 8 of the presentation, as you can see, the recurring profit increased by 307.6 billion yen compared to the same period of last fiscal year, out of which 130 billion yen or so was affected by the weaker yen, according to our analysis. So that was about the financial results for the first 3 quarters of fiscal 2022. Now moving on to the full year forecast of fiscal 2022. And I would like you to see page 12 of the presentation. If you can look at the blue numbers on the right-hand side of the table. For the full year forecast of fiscal 2022, we have conducted a review on the forecast for the last time based on the prevailing market conditions. As a consequence, for revenue, recurring profit, and net profit overall, for each of these items, compared to the last forecast announced in November, we made a slight downward revision. The full year revenue was reduced by 100 billion yen compared to the last forecast announced in November, and now we are forecasting 2,600 billion yen. Operating profit was down by 220 billion, increase of 20 billion yen compared to the last forecast at 290 billion yen. Recurring profit is down by 30 billion yen compared to the last forecast at 1,080 billion yen. Net profit was decreased by 30 billion yen compared to the last forecast at 1 trillion yen. This is our new forecast. However, out of the 30 billion yen reduction in recurring profit, approximately 23 billion yen is due to the changes in the foreign exchange assumptions. In the last forecast, for both the third and fourth quarters, we were assuming for 143 yen to the dollar in our foreign exchange assumption. However, this time around, for the fourth quarter, we are assuming for 130 yen to the dollar, and this calculation is reflected in the new forecast. For the recurring profit of the fourth quarter, as I just mentioned earlier, after hitting a peak in the second quarter this year, from the third quarter we have entered a downtrend, and the fourth quarter this will come down further to 74.1 billion yen, according to our projection. Now, to give you a breakdown by segment, and if you can open page 14, you see the changes from the last forecast on the far right columns for each of the segments. O&E and other liner trade business, as well as the air cargo transport business, are recording a remarkable decrease. For liner and logistics business altogether, there was a reduction of 55 billion yen to 883 billion yen is the new forecast of recurring profit. On the other hand, for the bulk shipping business, we have increased the forecast by 25 billion yen to 205 billion yen in recurring profit from this business. In the bulk shipping business's profit growth is driven mainly by the continuous favorable conditions of the automotive transport business. Now, next page, you see the changes in recurring profit in fiscal 22 in a graph. As you can see from here, for the liners logistics business, the supply chain is now coming back to normal conditions. However, the inventory level is piling up at the place of consumption. Inflation has also resulted in decrease of demand, and the spot rate of container vessels has come down. And For the air cargo business, and usually in the third quarter, we see a peak season and the cargo movement to remain sluggish this year. And those were the major factors behind the decrease of recurring profit. As you can see from the graph, I think it's self-explanatory that first quarter, second quarter, those were the peak of the business. And now after that, those periods, we are now seeing a downtrend as we move towards the normalization. For the bulk shipping business, the dry bulk market suffered a decline, but this was offset by the favorable automotive transportation business. So the dry bulk decline was covered up by this, and also with the mid to long-term contract supporting the firmness of the energy transports, we managed to minimize the decline, which we believe is quite a good number for us. All that I just mentioned are summarized on pages 9 to 11 of the presentation. So please look at these numbers for each segment when you have time. Now, finally, I would like to talk about the dividend forecast. And if you could go back to page 9 of the presentation, you see the bottom section of the paper. As I just mentioned, in our full year forecast, we are expecting a slight downward revision compared to the last forecast for our net profit. However, for the year-end dividend, we will maintain the dividend forecast at 160 yen per one share, unchanged from the last presentation. When this is converted into pre-stock split level, it's just that you have to triple this, but this is equal to 480 yen of dividends per one share. And if you combine with the interim dividend of 1,050 yen per one share at the pre-stock split level for the full year, this is equal to 1,530 yen per one share, which represents a dividend payout ratio of 25.9%. As you know, the stock split was conducted with the record date of September 30 last year and the effective date October 1st. So we conducted a 3-for-1 stock split for our common shares. With this, that was about the overview of the first 3 quarter results of fiscal 2022, and also I have announced a revised full year forecast. Also, as you may have learned from our homepage descriptions, the new medium-term management plan starting from fiscal 2023 will be announced on March 10th. Our future growth strategies, as well as our new capital policies, will be presented in this new medium-term management plan, so please look forward to them. That's all for myself. Thank you very much.
That's the end of the presentation. Now we move on to Q&A session. So the container shipping is on the downtrend. If this trend continues and contributing to the decreased profit next year, well, your balance sheet is very strong right now. The payout ratio of 25% could be raised, in other words, to keep at a higher the payout ratio going forward. This is Soga answering your question. Thank you for the good question. As to dividend payout ratio, and shareholders' return policy, that is a very big part of our capital policy. As I mentioned at the end of my presentation, on March the 10th, we are going to announce our new midterm management plan. And actually, that part will be a very big chunk of that plan. So as of today, I cannot go into details, but we are now exploring something different. Next question, as to ONE and its balance sheet, whether they have quite a big figure of net cash. What is the actual size of the net cash? Mr. Harada, please. This is Harada. In this quarter, in the color of magenta, they have accumulated the profit on a cumulative basis of the 3 quarters. They announced the cumulative number. And especially for the past 2.5 years, it was strong. Excluding dividend, the rest is accumulated in the capital, as capital. And of course, investment will start. So the part of that cash will be used for investments. So in terms of its balance sheet, it is more than sound, including dividend. That's what they have achieved. That said, they have been considering their business, adequate business, in the window of 10 years to think about the dividend, the policy for 3J for shareholders for 2023, 2024. About 29% capacity will be provided by newly built vessels compared to existing vessels. So there will be some changes in the tracking path of the company. So the shareholder companies, parent companies, are discussing how to deal with that potential situation for NE.
Thank you very much for the question. Now we'd like to move on to the next question. Thank you very much. I have 2 questions. One is about the container business profit outlook. According to other companies' presentation, even with the current spot rates, they shall be able to achieve profits and avoid any losses. Do you agree with that view? Especially if the current rate of spot rates continue as is, with the new contracts coming renewal in May, I think the situation will become very difficult. And will you still be able to achieve profits at that level? So that's the thing that I'm not really sure about. So can you comment on that point? Second is about the air cargo and also air transportation and also logistics. We have seen a steep deceleration from the 3rd and 4th quarter. So what's your forecast about the speed of rate adjustments in the future and the outlook for the future? Which quarter will be the bottom quarter? If you have any forecast on that, please comment on them. Thank you very much for the questions, and that will be explained by Harada-san. Thank you very much for the questions. Regarding the first question, I was anticipating this question. The container business's profit and loss outlook. Of course, other companies made a presentation in which they talked about that if the current rate is maintained, they shall be able to maintain profitability. And you were asking our opinions, and also for the renewal from May, the service contract for North America will be up for renewal. So, regarding our view regarding the freight outlook, of course, I'm not in a capacity to talk about the other companies' comments regarding the freight outlook, but in our view, if the current spot rates are used for all of the opportunities, it will just be break even. So we believe it's going to be very tough if the current spot rate is maintained. So for that reason, if the spot rate declines, we haven't seen any decline from the current level. So I think because the timing of the freight return is slow, so the North America transport is slightly moving, but the current spot rate is a very tough situation from when you look at it from the break-even point. So again, from this reason, the spot rate has come down, but it is now leveling off, and we are not seeing any further decline at this moment. So that's one reason. But on the other hand, towards the renewal in May, each company right now channel year before and after that, the cargo volume is now reducing. So therefore, the service omission is now conducted. They are skipping the services, but still the volume is not coming back. So the volume shortage is the major reason behind this. And of course, North America inventory problem is still there, and of course in Europe and other regions, the war is there, and of course the general economic conditions are also another factor. So depending on the timing, I think the situation will change. And towards the May period, the renewal, the spot rates, at which level the annual rate will be determined, will have an impact on the forecast, and we'll be able to see that when we have visibility on that. But if the current rate continues, that will be the case. But of course, in the fourth quarter, the reason why we are expecting a profitability is because we have the annual contract, and that's making a great contribution to our profits right now. And actually, the annual rates are maintained, observed with a higher probability. And as a consequence, the long-term contracts compared to the short terms have been coming down in terms of total proportion, and the short-term contracts are now increasing in proportion. However, the long-term contracts has been observed more than anticipated, so that is making a good contribution, and therefore, what happens to this level going forward will have a significant impact on the PL for 2023. So we are keeping a close eye on this trend. And the second question regarding the air freight and also logistics business. In the fourth quarter, again, the profit level is likely to plunge or reduce significantly. And where are we likely to hit the bottom? I think that was a question from you. For air cargo and also for logistics, for both of them, the problem right now is the shortage of cargo, and that is the single biggest problem, especially when it comes to air cargo. In November, December, the delivery from Japan has hit a bottom, and we have already have the flash numbers for November and December, but compared to 2019 pre-COVID level, this is the lowest monthly number. Of course, it depends slightly and differently from the destination. For North America, Asia, and other in the region, the November number was the lowest over the last several years. So the volume is small, and of course, because of container vessels, there has been a reduction. So in our forecast, in our projection in terms of air freight, despite this limited volume, the air freight has been maintained at a certain level, which is something noteworthy, I believe. So in that regard, of course, that's partly because we have secured long-term contracts, but of course, the business per se, the dedicated cargo freights, the view of how to secure the space might have changed, but of course we have to keep a close eye before making a decision. But anyway, despite the low quantity level, the freight has been maintained fairly well. The deterioration of the PL performance is dependent on the volume, I think. So there's nothing we can do right now for the fourth quarter. But likewise, the same applies to logistics. The AFF will also be affected by, but also for the ocean, OFF, as it was explained by the CFO, there's a timing difference issue here because we have a contract in place with customers, and there are the freight determined by the contract, but actually the space per se from the carrier, because the spot rate is coming down, and as a result of the renew, so there is a spread of the prices before the contract expiry, until the contract expiry with the customers, that kind of spread will continue to happen because of the timing difference, and that is going to have impact on the OFF business. But this will diminish and go away in the future. But right now, this is still remaining as we speak today. So the yield from these business, and when are we going to hit the bottom from this business? For the ocean freight, I think it seems that we won't likely come down further from the break-even point any longer. But of course, for the forwarder, when the customer prices are decided, the timing difference spread will become smaller. So I think we are going to see a further deterioration on that part. But as far as the air freight is concerned, as we talked about the yield, what is going to happen from now onwards will have to be seen. But I think it seems that we are doing well despite those conditions. If the volume comes down further, the cargo volume comes down further, like the belly prices for the passenger planes, that could also have another impact on us. So I don't think that we will have another bottom, but we have to keep a close eye on the future trends. That's all for myself. Thank you. Thank you. Regarding your first answer, ONE, in order for them to secure an annual contract from North America to generate profits, the spot rates have to increase further. Is that the right interpretation, or wasn't that your explanation? Yeah, we said that, but another point is that throughout the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic, the value of the space were very much appreciated. So the contracts that we enter into will be 1 year, and the U.S. economy, given the piling up of the inventories, how will the U.S. economy come back is another issue that we have to keep an eye on. Of course, the U.S. economy is very strong, and I think we are not going to foresee a real deep recession. So the purchases will continue. So towards the end of the year, there might be a shortage of spaces, and there is a potential. We will not rule out the possibility of spot freight prices surging. So how to secure the supply of spaces and how to secure the right prices for that is something that we have to work on. I got it. Thank you very much.
I have two questions. First about container, and the second question is about air freight. The first question, container vessels, long-term contract, and the level of freight, and how to think about it. Historically, there's volume discount. Basically, the freight that had some discount in the long-term contract, but the demand is weak. Is it really possible to set the freight for the long-term contract higher than the spot? And the second question, the yield and the air cargo, air freight. The profit level and the freight level might be coming down, it seems. Going forward, when the volume situation does not change much, what will be the perspective of the freights? Would it go down or would it be maintained? These two questions. Thank you. Here's Harada. First, the container ship long-term contract and the freight level. In the past, whether there's a promise of the volume to some extent, and so compared to the other spot rate, there will be some discount. There have been discount. You're right. It depends on the certain spot level. That could be the expectation on the part of the customers. But against the spot rates and the fluctuations of spot in the future, whether the customer would go for discount or even willing to pay out premium to get the space in April and in May, when the renewal comes, it is still invisible. It seems that the customers are watching closely, wait and see mood about the spot rates. So based on that sentiment, there will be either discount or premium in the negotiations. If the customers think that there should be premium, actually there are such customers. So it's not necessarily discount that will happen. It depends on negotiations, what kind of sentiment for the future, and that will determine the rates for the long-term contracts. In any case, the situation is very tough to break even. So on a long-term basis, we supply the space on a very long term that will make the situation for us even tougher. So at this moment, it is invisible how the rates will be determined for the long-term contracts. Next question, NCA, the margin of the air cargo, and the volume is not likely to recover very soon. So how are we looking at it? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the volume movement and the other freights in that relationship compared to the pre-COVID, the volume that is weak, but the yield is maintained. And of course, that we need to watch closely, but it is doing rather well. So the value of the space is being appreciated. As to Japan, the more than 2 years contracts exist from Japan. The space from Japan is sold off. Part of it is already sold off. So we can get the freights as the predetermined. And the renewal of freights from Asia through Narita to North America, it's already happening, but compared to the current spot rates, there's premium on the rates with customers. So especially the passenger flights, the belly space is not dictating the freight's determination overall, but we are going to watch closely. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to move on to our next questioner. Hello. Can you hear me? Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have 3 questions. First of all, relation to your previous answer, the annual contract renewal for Europe and also the early bird for North America. Is there anything that you can add as an explanation and supplement your explanation? I would like to hear that. Second is about the container spot rates. It's close to break even, so you're saying that it's close to bottom, according to your explanation. I understand that, but from here, with new vessels being completed and the demand recovery alone may still be very tough on you in terms of your supply and demand situation. So if you're able to absorb the new vessel's completion and still sustain the freight from plunging further, I think you have to work very hard on that. Otherwise, I don't think you will be able to achieve that ambition. Is that correct? So that's my second question. My third question is about YRK Logistics. We look at the fourth quarter projection, it's 4.8 billion yen. And in profit, so how to see this profit level from outsider's point of view? The forwarder profit is almost nothing, and only contractor logistics profit is the only component here. Is that correct? If that is correct, I think the forwarder's profit is almost break even. Maybe break even with forwarder is not really usually. So I'm sure you have been securing some spread, but other burdens are higher. So maybe can you explain, give some more color to that? That's something that I would like to hear. Okay, Hara-san, please. Thank you very much for the question. So I would like to answer to those 3 questions. I'll try to be concise. The first of all, regarding the early bird results for North America and Europe, of course, early bird is usually contracted on a calendar year basis, and the results are already available. Initially, the spot rates have come down, but still the spot and the in the middle between the spot rates and also the previous year's level, it was decided. That was the trend that we have seen. But it turns out that it is dragged mostly heavily by the spot rates, the prevailing spot rates, in many cases for the early bird. Of course, that's still within the range of our earlier assumptions. But a certain amount of volume is maintained. So therefore, because we're choosing this, it doesn't mean that we are losing money. It's not we are generating losses because of securing these contracts. So in general, those rates were determined in line with our range of assumptions. All right, so the issue of break-even. Let's say if today is break-even level, and as I said earlier, with the new vessels being delivered in 2023 and 29% of existing vessels, that's the new vessels becoming available. And then the recovery of demand alone will not solve all the problems because there might be a concern of oversupply. Of course, certainly, in terms of supply and demand, the supply will increase there. But in the case of container business, compared to the capital of the vessel expenses, their fixed cost that's related to the service, and that's quite excessive. That's quite a large burden. So, in essence, there's a vessel, and if all the vessels have been deployed, and if everybody is playing on that with all the vessels being operated, I think that is going to be a hell for all the players. So if the demand is not really recovering to the fullest, then even if the vessel is there, we are not going to operate the vessel. That is the prevailing view in the market. So by doing so, we can save the fixed costs for operations, and the freight will not suffer a decline. So it's all up to the each company's decisions and the alliance's decision. But of course, the availability of vessels, and if the demand does not recover fully, it doesn't mean that the freight will just free fall and plunge. That's our current assumption. But of course, it has to be determined by each company, and we have to keep an eye and see what happens. But of course, then as a result of this, those global players, there's only 7 companies who can be claimed as 7 companies, and these 7 companies are different in sizes, and the cost competitiveness of each company is not really significantly different, and the break-even point are not likely to be significantly different among the 7 companies. Given that situation, those vessels that is going to transport air, even because the vessels are complete, not all of the players are going to operate all of them. That's my personal view. And finally, regarding the logistics business, for the fourth quarter of logistics, YAK in particular, compared to the first 3 quarters, the reason why the fourth number is like this is because of the G&A factor. The YNK business segment, we also have our G&A, and the bonuses and the G&A expenses increases generally in the fourth quarter because those are allocated for the first quarter. So therefore, the general and admin expenses in the fourth quarter is higher compared to the other 3 quarters. And because of the business performance, it looks as though the fourth quarter profit is lower. But it's not that a certain segment is running on losses. That's not the case. So of course, the contract logistics is a very stable business, relatively speaking. So when the cargo volume is not really changing that significantly, so on a relative basis compared to other quarters, the performance is really comparable to other quarters. However, as I said earlier, the group employees' SG&A expenses kick in here. So compared to other quarters, the profit level appears to be smaller compared to other quarters. But for other businesses like FJ&A, it's not that this business is expected to generate losses. The number for the quarter in the fourth quarter, as I said, because of the reasons, there's some seasonality factors here, especially because of the fourth quarter, the seasonalities are there, and that's the reason why we are projecting this number. That's all for myself. Thank you.
Next question. I have 2 questions. First, bulk shipping profit. On page 7, on a quarterly basis, the structure there, dry bulk, automotive, and tanker. Second quarter, third quarter, absolute amount are not so different, but the breakdown is different, I understand. So specifically for automotive transportation and how much for dry bulk, And that's what I'd like to know. And then the fourth quarter, what will be the impact on automotive, tanker, dry bulk? And what is your plan for each of these segments in the bulk shipping business? My second question, it's not about the financial results, but you have announced the different changes. Mr. Soga, CFO, is going to be the new president. Is there anything that you can share with us at this moment as to the organizational things or the HR things that you can share with us? Thank you. Mr. Soga, please. Your first question, the bulk shipping, the recurring profits and its breakdown. As you mentioned, for this fiscal year, second quarter and the third quarter, absolute figures of recurring the profits are almost the same in the first quarter, a bit better than the second quarter, third quarter, but all in all on the same level. But of course, the breakdown is different. For each section and its numbers, we do not disclose them. So we cannot talk about figures themselves. But in the first quarter, 64.1 billion yen, that's the recurring profit. And the main driver there was dry bulk. And the market in the first quarter was quite good. And before that, in the previous fiscal year, fourth quarter, from there, usually in winter, because of the seasonality, the bulk shipping is not so robust. But FY2021 fourth quarter, actually, the results were quite good. And the first quarter, also, dry bulk had a very good performance. And in the second and the third quarters, dry bulk market aggravated. So the dry bulk numbers reduced, while automotive transportation numbers rose. So the overall numbers were about the same between the quarters, but the breakdown is different. Automotive transportation replacing dry bulk in the level of contribution. It's not that the dry bulk is running in the red, that it is producing good numbers. And in the fourth quarter forecast, if you look at the page 13, the bulk shipping forecast, 30.6 billion, 55 billion for the third quarter. So the down by about 2.5 billion. Here, dry bulk market was expected to go up more, especially in September and onwards. We thought that it would go into recovery phase, but the economy in China and its zero COVID the policy, the sentiment aggravated. So there was no such growth. It was actually coming down. That's the dry bulk market. And so the fourth quarter, the forecast is based on that situation. So as I mentioned earlier, from the first quarter, dry bulk started to come down gradually. It's not operating in the red, but the downward trend through the fourth quarter. As to automotive transportation, from the second quarter and onwards, it is growing in the third quarter, the covering the reduction in the dry bulk, so that the overall the bulk shipping number is maintained. And in the fourth quarter, automotive transportation will do well, but not as much as 55 billion yen, that level. That's our forecast for bulk shipping business. But going forward, FY2023, probably the China internal policies, for example, for real estate, the government policy change, real estate companies will be are now being supported already by the Chinese government. So the sentiment is expected to improve greatly in China. So from April or from May, in any case, from the early part of the year, we will see recovery and improvement. That's what we expect in compiling the budget for the next fiscal year. Your second question about management structure, as you said, for one, I'm going to succeed Mr. Nagasawa as president of NYK. What I can talk about right now is as follows. So on the March 10th, we are going to announce the new midterm management plan, and for the coming 4 years, and then 8 years, up until 2030, we are going to look ahead to 2030 and then compile our management strategies. And as I mentioned earlier, new capital policy will be in place. So based on that new plan, that we are going to have very specific action programs, and without any hesitation, we are going to execute those plans. Another point about the organization, ESG, first year of ESG, that was 2021. It was by Mr. Nagasawa. So 2022 is the second year, and the next year is the third year. So to promote ESG management and the enlightenment of our employees has already been completed, more or less. So from the next year on, we are going to go into the next phase. So we are going to announce the specific action, the programs, as much as possible in the midterm plan. And to execute all that, we have 7 headquarters or divisions. And from April 1st, we are going to a new one, which is named ESG Strategy Division. So ESG management, implementation of ESG management that will be led by this new division starting on April 1st. I cannot talk about in a very comprehensive manner, but I just want to touch upon these 2 key points. Thank you. A supplementary question. The supply and demand for automotive transportation carriers. What is your thought on that? Actually, my biggest concern since last year is Pacific trade from Japan to America, and what will be the changes, especially up until before summer last year. Because of interest rate rising in the North America, there was a high the probability to start recession toward the end of last year, the pressuring down the production of sales in automobiles. So we should not increase the space, we thought. But according to more recent comments by analysts or automobile manufacturers, in the US, the retail balance sheets or the individuals are improved. So they buy cars, even with some rising interest rates. The things like cars continue to be purchased. They will continue to buy cars, according to some analysis. And the current US economy, it's not probably recession. It will make some good soft landing. If that's the case, the will to purchase cars and the other capability of buying cars will be maintained. So in North America, in particular, the transportation and the demand will not go down probably during 2023. And so that will be a driving force. And in the Southeast Asia area or to European market, we will not see the bad situations. Actually, there might be some improvements. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, we are running out of time, and we are approaching the scheduled time to finish this meeting. If there's no further objections, we would like to finish the Q&A section at this juncture. So, as we have informed you earlier, I would like to have Mr. Harada-san's comment to finish this meeting. Once again, Line and Logistics Head of the Business, my name is Harada. Once again, very nice to meet you. 2018 Ocean Network Express was inaugurated, and ever since, for the 5 years, whenever I had this, I always attended the IR presentations and talked about the LNO businesses. Ocean Network Express, when it was established, we called it a teasing problem because of many issues happened one after another, and we caused you a lot of concerns. However, after the third year onwards, because of the pandemic, the situation in the world changed dramatically, and especially the supply-demand situation was impacted significantly by COVID. As a consequence, we have seen unprecedented numbers on a continuous basis. Amid this situation, in order to explain the LNM business in a most easy-to-understand way, I have tried to make explanations during the IR sessions, but I'm sure that my efforts were not sufficient to some extent in some cases. I would like to extend my apologies here. The LNL business and also the LNL business in this trend of normalization, unfortunately, we are seeing there might be a certain occasions that we see a setback in the future. However, ONE, YLK, NHA, all their businesses, after all, because the population is growing around the world, and so long as the economy is growing, these businesses will definitely continue to grow. Therefore, including these 3 companies, I hope that you will continue support to these 3 companies and overall to the NYK line business. Thank you very much for all your support over the last 5 years. With this, we would like to finish the financial presentation for the first 3 quarters of fiscal 2022. Thank you very much. And there's a survey. Please, we will appreciate your cooperation. Thank you very much once again for your participation today.